Hello.
Good afternoon, or morning, or night,
Or
or
no.
middle of the night,
Or tomorrow in some places.
or good tomorrow to you, Australians.
How's it
Andres,
going?
good to
How you
see you,
doing?
sir. It
It's
is
always
going well. I am excited about today's episode. I say that about every single one. I just like this show in general.
it's
But today we're still gonna do AI stuff, which is what we do, you know. But we're going back to fundamentals today because as exciting as AI is and as fast as everything is moving, you know what we can't forget?
our
I was
names.
hoping you would guess there. We need to rehearse this one. No, not our names. The fundamentals. The fundamentals, which is
Yes.
something that's very important to both you and I. API design.
Yes. We've done this for a while. We've iterated on our mindset a lot, and I think we have a good basis for designing APIs, REST APIs, I might say. Um, if you followed us for a while, you know we talk about this quite a bit um, around open API, spec-driven development, how to test all that. So we've got quite a bit of content between you and I around all of that. But in this case, it's a little bit different, right?
It is different, yes. It's the same and it's different, which is just such a cliche, but it is actually the facts. So what we're gonna do today, we are going to design an API spec for that
Yeah.
garden API that we've been working on. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be designing it with the intention of having humans and robots being the consumer. And that in itself is kind of like, okay, well, that's dumb that you're even saying that. But there is actually a difference. You do have to go in and design these things intentionally different in order to get the maximum amount of reuse if you want to do it one time, which of course we all do. We like don't repeat yourself as opposed to we enjoy typing. The more you type, the more likelihood you're going to mess up. So what we're going to do today is design something to do it one single time. How does that sound
Cool.
to you, Andres?
It sounds very interesting because yeah, it's that intentionality difference of your API design, right? It's not the same. I mean, an AI agent can assume what you meant for a human understandable thing, but you can make it more optimal in different ways for an agent as well. So I'm excited to see what we come up with.
Agreed. Agreed. And what we're doing, we're not going to be building an entirely new API from scratch. Again, we're going to be enhancing that one that we've been using. But before we go and look at anything, there's a couple things that you and I need to cover to get our audience heated with debate and throwing comments at us live, which is why we do this live, so we can argue with people that watch us. You and I are both advocates. I'm glad that we actually agree on this one. You
Yeah.
and I are both advocates of spec-driven development. Now that's gone through a handful of different names over the past few years, especially with what you and I refer to it as. We used to call it API first development, which
Yeah.
my first understanding of what API first development was let's design the API and then let's write the UI around it. That's what I thought
Yep.
API first development was, and that's not quite right.
Yep.
Really, it's about treating your API as your product. And with the rise of AI and the popularity of it and the accessibility of AI, that's really more important than ever because what we're seeing, whether we realize it or not, is the rapid decline of user interfaces and the skyrocketing popularity of APIs.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Because why would I build a UI when I could just chat or do something with an LLM that has reasoning capabilities that can just do it for
I would love that.
me? Yes. So when we're talking about API first, we talk about spec-driven development. And Andres, why don't you explain what that means?
Yeah, so going back to what you said around API first, right? So there was the first misunderstanding. You said it's, hey, I build the API, then the front end. But there's the other API first where you do code first, right? So you can write your code, and then if you're in like in .NET, use something like Swashbuckle to generate your contract, your open API, based on the code. But what you and I are specifically are talking about with our version of API first and spec-driven development, well, it's not just ours, right? But the one we mean is around designing your API with the contract first, which is an open API, right? And what is open API? It used to be called Swagger, kind of like the older, a little bit better, but it's a way to define all your paths, all your endpoints, right? What the resources are for REST APIs. I think you froze, Alan, but I'll continue.
I'm back.
Um,
I'm back.
Cool. Your inputs and your outputs, right? And how you define those inputs and outputs are based off of JSON schema, right? So you can define this is a string. It has a max length of 100 characters. This is an object with 3 attributes, and all those things can be embedded in your contract, your open API, that, as we learned in the previous streams, if you're exposing MCP or exposing tools using an MCP server, it's what it uses as well. It's JSON schema, not open API. They kind of work hand in hand, but they're not the same thing. So you can leverage those same JSON schemas probably, and we'll see today, for your MCP servers.
Yes. And one of the reasons, and you might have said this when I had my internet blip, one of the reasons I specifically like spec-driven development as opposed to code first is because spec-driven development allows you to get everybody, all the stakeholders in kind of on the ground floor. I can't reasonably expect product and engineering managers and whoever else to be collaborating, looking at the code. That's not
Yeah.
that's not really a thing that I want everybody to do, because then oftentimes I have to buy licenses for everybody for, maybe they're working in Visual Studio, whatever it is, right? But if I'm looking at a spec, there's plenty of things that visualize specs. There's plenty of things that let
And
me talk about things from a user flow.
and like you
Go ahead.
said, right, it's treating your APIs as the product, right? So shifting a little bit, if you're thinking about an application with a front end that you're going to sell, you don't start by building everything and then showing it to the stakeholder, or to you don't start building for the design to get a design out of that, right? For product. That's weird. But in this case, you get the design first as well, right? In a front end, you do mocks or you do wireframes, maybe high fidelity mocks with Figma and stuff like that. In Open API, it's the same way, right? And there's the concept of mocks as well, and you can get started without any code and visualize that and make sure, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This is kind of the flow we're looking for. These are all the endpoints that satisfy our workflows and our feature set and our requirements.
Yep. So let's do something. Talking is fun,
Yeah.
but you know what's more fun? Doing something.
Ah.
So what I actually want to do first is look at the tool that I personally have been using for the past 6-7 years when it comes to actually designing an open API spec. You and I prefer YAML generally for these. Open API spec allows for YAML or JSON. I don't know why I like YAML more than JSON for this, but it's what I've come to know, and that's what I like.
Pros and cons: less curly brackets, it's more visually pleasant in the YAML world, but God forbid you added one extra space somewhere, because then you'll struggle. But linters are pretty good nowadays, so.
Yes, they are. So let me share screen, and let's take a look at the tool that I've used for a really long time, and that is Swagger Hub. Basically, the OG, right? This is where OpenAPI Spec kind of evolved from. Oh, yeah, that looks. We can do that, right? You can read that text.
Yeah, you can. I don't know if you
This.
can close up a little bit, but I can read it on my
I mean,
white
I can
screen.
zoom in. I can keep zooming in. So this is the open API spec for what you and I have built already over the past, I don't know what, 2 months.
Yep.
Now, before we only had an MCP server, we were only using AI tools. So in the past several days in the mornings, I've been working on this kind of retrofitting or creating this from what we already have had. But it defines a whole bunch of different things, like the schemas for the request bodies and the response bodies, the paths, the parameters in each path. There's a lot of good information in here. And this was my tool of choice, not because it does a fantastic job in helping me build, but because I think it does a good job rendering and letting me
Yep.
see what I am creating over here on the side. But again, I have to know what I'm doing over here in order to get something good over here. It does give you errors, it does lint, but it usually says like here's a good example. If I just add test, just says you can't have these additional properties. Or if I have something that is correct, like that is right, but I don't have any fields inside of it, it says I expect this to be an object, but it doesn't tell me what's supposed to be in
Yeah, it's very. What's the tool we used to use to validate JSON? AJV, right? So it kind of throws those exact same errors, right? This is using probably in the background a JSON schema validator, right? And it's those very
there.
generic errors, right? If you're using a one of and stuff like that, it's just not super helpful text.
Yeah, agreed. But it does render everything, and it does actually let you go in and try these out. So in my slash beds, if we try it, we can see that I do have some beds in my garden. And these are
Ah,
the ones that were
no,
added by our MCP server.
no security. Okay.
Uh, that's nope. It's not how we roll here. I would hope you know that by now. Uh, anyway, so it's nice at rendering. It's really not good for building. And I've used this for a long time, and I've just kind of smiled, gritted my teeth, and said, "Okay, well, this is just how you do it."
Yep.
But Postman just released, like last week, since our last live stream, just
Yep.
released Spec Hub, which is what they answer back to this. This is their clapback to Swagger Editor. And
Cool.
it's actually pretty nice. It's, and I'm not saying that because I'm getting paid, because I'm not getting paid. I do actually like it. So let's take a look at it and see the visual differences. So I did just a copy. Oh, I'll zoom in. I'll zoom in.
Oh yeah. Nice. Did you see me squint?
I did. Okay. Oh no. Okay, hold on. So that docks. Probably zoomed in too
Okay.
far. That's okay. That's all right.
Yeah.
So there's this new feature over here called specs. Previously, they had APIs, and that does still exist. But this is better. This is a lot better than
Yeah, I
specs.
remember using the API and the visuals weren't as good, right? If you're comparing with Swagger, Swagger had like the nice colors and all those fancy uh, eye candy. I haven't tried
Mhm.
Spec, so I'm excited to see how this kind of looks and how you
Yeah.
iterate around it as well, which is why we're here.
Yes. Yeah. So what we're going to do today is we're obviously going to be looking at this, and I'll talk about it as we're enhancing our API. But the API enhancements that we're doing today is I want to see the catalog in our little Garden Buddy API
Hmm.
because right now, whenever I'm chatting with OpenAI and I say, "Hey, what else should I plant in this garden bed?" It can see what I have planted in the garden bed, and then it recommends just these completely random things to me that are good companion plants, but I have to like look up what they are, and I don't know anything. Like I had to look up what sunchokes were the other day, and I was like, "Oh, sunchoke, that's probably like an artichoke, right? Because it ends in choke." Uh, no, no, it's not. It's like a little potato. So I've learned something, and now I've taught all of you kind of what a sunchoke is.
Nice.
But you can't just go and buy those at the store. I think I did actually end up buying them, for better for worse, because I wanted to try
Falling
it.
into that
But
you're falling into that LLM marketing stunt now. It's like
I am,
Instagram
I am,
ads.
yes, yeah. Marketers, pay attention. That worked on me. I think I bought them from Etsy. Like they weren't actually easy to find at all.
Really?
Uh,
Did you get like the
yeah,
seeds or did you
yeah.
actually get like the plant to
No,
then?
it's they're like potatoes, so you get little tubers, and they look like bulbs, like you would plant in flowers. But they grow. They have a really nice ornamental plant, and then they grow like tiny potatoes in the ground that you can eat. So
Nice.
who knew?
Is this show?
I sure
Are
didn't.
we gonna turn this into a gardening show later on? I don't know.
Yes, we're
Stay
going
tuned.
from AI to horticulture very slowly over the next 10 episodes.
Yeah. Start using my farm hat.
Yes. Yeah, we're not going to have people from tech. We're just going to have master gardeners on as our guests.
Martha
Anyway,
Stewart, and yeah.
yes. So great tangent. But as a result, I want to be able to add the seeds that I have available. As a gardener, I've been gardening for many years. I have realistically 80 different types of seeds in my little seed box. So what I want to be able to do is add all of those 80. Daryl, let's bring Daryl's comment up because
Oh,
you got me,
I'll
Daryl.
take it. Oh.
Okay, there we go. Crop rotation is key. You are correct. Um, I have a bunch of different seeds, and what I want the LLM to be able to do is get that list of seeds and pick from what I have available to suggest things for me to plant in my garden. So
Okay.
that's all we have to add today. That's what we're going to be adding. That's the practical of our stream today. And we're going to be enhancing this Open API spec to do that. Sound good?
Noise. Sounds perfect, my friend.
Yes. Can you read this text, by the way? Can you read the text on the screen? Do I need to zoom in anymore?
I think you're good at that point. It's a great balance between size and not messing up the dock on the side.
Okay, perfect. So obviously the main view here is still the YAML, our hundreds of lines of YAML. But what I really like is over on the left-hand side, it breaks down that's collections. Hold on, let's go to specs. It breaks down the pieces of the Open API spec. So I don't have to scroll through. I can go and actually see from the top level what is everything that I have in here. So if I want to go and look at my different schemas, I can click and jump specifically to see what are the fields that I pass in when I have a harvest. But here's the cool thing. Like here's the part that I actually like. That's nice. That's some sugar. But the piece that's cool is I can
I
add
saw
stuff
that.
from here. But what's even cooler than that is I don't like writing JSON schema. Do you like writing JSON schema?
I mean, I was a JSON schema
Just say
developer
no.
at some
Just say
point.
no.
No.
Just say no. Just okay. Cool. So instead, we can just provide JSON,
Okay.
which is way
Ooh.
better. Now, normally I would be able to copy paste. I don't think I have one in here, but we'll just make it up. All right, this will
It has the
test.
type. Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
so it's looking like it's a consolidated set of tools that I've used, right? Because there's like online tools to do this, but obviously you have to go in the browser, separate page. The navigation around the schema and all that, there's an extension in VS Code, for example. But again, it's separately if you're fully designing your APIs here in Postman, which is kind of your API hub, or your Spec Hub.
Pick up. Yep.
It's nice to have it all consolidated, which is great.
Which is yes. So
But
here's what
yeah.
I'm doing. I have the type def over in TypeScript on a different screen.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm looking at, and I'm just creating a very basic placeholder JSON JSON object, and it's generating the schema over here for me on the right hand side. But there's a lot more to this than what we're doing. when specifically we're talking about human and AI consumption. Because when you and I look at this, and you and I have looked at a lot of these together in work, and this is usually how it looks. It has a bunch of different uh, properties, and it has the type. But you know what else you can add that's pretty important with this kind of thing?
Description.
Is a description. Yes, on every single one of these fields, because we need to define that domain knowledge. I can't reasonably expect an LLM that's going to be consuming all of this stuff to be a domain expert in what we're doing. Now, I can reasonably understand that some things it was trained on the internet.
And I mean, I've looked at a lot of code, a lot of schemas, and I can't help but always think that naming things is the most complicated thing in development. So they're usually attributes and properties that just have a name that doesn't mean anything, or even a human or a bot could assume, right? So we're better at describing things, but not naming variables or properties.
That is the truth. So this is not everything that I have for this, but this will do for now. Just because I want to show some of the other things, we can move on. But another thing that I want to bring up that's actually really important when we're talking about designing APIs for humans and for AI, just add more properties. Just do it. Here's why. As a human, if I have over on my type definition on my other screen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more fields to add.
Oh, really?
There is an approximately 0% chance I, as a human, will ever fill out all of those fields, ever. Especially when I'm trying to add 80 seeds, right?
Yeah.
If I have 20 properties that I have to configure for 80 seeds, I'm not filling out 1,600 fields. 0% chance. There's just no way that the return on that is 0. I will just grit and bear it. But here's the thing. Let me insert this and we'll take a look at that. Seed. Here's the thing. When we're designing these APIs for human and AI consumption, just add them. You know why? Add them and make them optional, because when a human's consuming it, they're not gonna do with it. They'll see what the required properties are, and they will ignore the optional properties. But you give that to an LLM, it knows all of these things. If we go and we'd say, I'm adding Ford Hook zucchini to my seed list, I don't know the planting depth. I don't know how many days to germination. I don't know how many days to maturity. You know what does? An LLM.
Yep.
That's going to be using that endpoint as a tool to fill out this data. So as long as it's optional, I'm not blocking the human from doing it, but I am also giving the LLM an opportunity to enrich my data, because a human could possibly consume it on a read.
Yeah, and consumption is much easier for a human. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's
like
a question.
Go.
More on the Postman side and the JSON generation stuff. Did you see any hook for Postbot within that, where you can hook it up? Hey, I want an object that has this, this, and that. Oh, I guess you can just ask it and it'll generate. But
yeah, let's see. I haven't tried Postbot with this. I don't know if it gets context of the Spec Hub, so let's find out. So just for anybody that doesn't know, Postbot is the baked-in AI agent inside of Postman app. So you can ask it to do things, and it takes actions on your actual data and on requests. It does a whole bunch of different stuff. Andres and I did a stream a long time ago, well over a year ago.
It was one of the first. It was one of the first ones where we had technical difficulties.
Yeah.
So I can't include.
Where we were just trying to see what you can do. Yeah. So yeah, that's right. That's frustrating. But let's see. Let's try to add. Let's see. Can you add descriptions to all the properties of the seed schema.
It would be
Good, it does.
nice.
Okay, so no, it looks like it doesn't
Yeah,
have
it's still
context.
on the yeah, the spec. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, which is fine. It's still early, just released. That'd have been nice, but again, we would have had to go. That would have been a trust and verify kind of thing. We would have had to go in and see. So this is probably complaining. Yeah, this
It's
is
unused.
complaining
Yeah.
that we don't use it anywhere. So let's use it. Let's see. So for any new resource, Andres, what are the standard endpoints that we need for a resource? Specifically, let's think about the context of a seed catalog.
Yep. It's your CRUD.
What are we
right?
gonna do?
Post. Need a post. Seeds.
Yes. So let's add post.
That's to add.
Ooh, hold on.
Oh, it adds it.
That's
It
what
adds
I'm doing.
it on the cursor.
That's what it did just now. Let's see. I'm surprised that it did that. I thought it was gonna. Where'd it go?
It's under there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's adding it at the
Okay.
cursor. Yeah. So it's new. So here's the feedback. It would be
Yeah.
it would be
Yeah.
like, because you're working on the left side, right? So you're working on the visual side with the collapse and all that. So it would be like adding to that list. And I would even expect it to be after observations, right? If I added.
Yep. Now let me see if it has a beautify. It does. Okay. Oof. I need to change my settings. I am a two space person, not a 4 space person.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh man, I
With
added
you.
4 spaces everywhere. My heart. Okay. so let's get past that tiny little hiccup. Over here, let's just do everything from here. See
Yeah.
what we can do. What would you think add would do?
Attribute? Oh, well, yeah. There you go.
Okay, so let's add a response. 200.
And you're getting seeds, so that would be an array. Would you go to this keep? Could you do it in the? Well, you can do it in line.
I think.
Oh, it's already there. It's the tabbing's wrong.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so as far as that goes, can't really. Okay, I can't
Expand.
edit what. I can't expand that.
Oh,
And I think I'm
no,
too
it's not in
zoomed in.
response.
Yeah.
Okay, so zoom out. We
Okay.
can try that.
Okay.
Still.
So seeds. So we don't want that. You and I don't like returning arrays as the body of a get or a list operation. Do you?
No, I'll just say no, but yeah, there's the why. You usually include pagination or stuff like that, so we typically add an items attribute.
Yes. So what we'll do is we'll say we won't add pagination or anything right now, but we will follow the standard object route. So we'll say for our response, we're going to do it's an object. We want specifically the seeds property.
Yeah.
Properties. It has IntelliSense, so you can actually see what we can do. And then in here, we have seeds. That's going to be an array. And then the items, this is the part that I think is cool. If we do
$sign or ref.
Yeah, so you can do ref and it brings up all of the things that you can reference, like just hit seed, and then we're good. So we have the seeds and we can say, yeah, that is what we want for this. So here's another thing that we need to do when we're designing an API for humans and for AI. What we did just here is what you and I would do pretty normal for building for humans. You agree? Like this is familiar.
Yeah.
You and I have done this 1,000 times. But that is not what we need to do when we are also designing this for a robot. Do you know what else we need to do?
Add the description to the attribute.
But yeah, I mean, yes, of course we need to do the description. The description is providing context to the LLM when it is consuming those things. So I don't like using summary for that. I like using description. And this is going to say, returns the entire seed catalog with names and species and quantity left. Because that's what you would want, really. Like when we're talking about using this in our MCP server, where I'm just trying to chat, and let's just say I'm talking to Alexa. I have this MCP server hooked up to Alexa, and I say, hey, what would go well in my main garden bed? And it can go in, and we just need it to fetch the list. We need the name, the species, and how many things that are left. Because if I don't have any seeds left, that's not really a viable option. I'm not about to go and buy more. So this is what we would return back. This is the context we would need to provide to the tool. But also importantly, what we need to do is add an operation ID. This is going to be essentially your tool name when it comes to building MCP servers.
Okay.
The seeds. So that's what
even if it's not for an MCP server, highly recommend operation ID, because most of the tools that work with OpenAPI or generate stuff from OpenAPI use the operation ID for, let's say, SDK generator. That's a big one. It uses that as a function name. Your naming convention wouldn't work in JavaScript, but
I mean, you could put it in square brackets.
Yeah. But yeah, just a note there.
I like that for tool names. Yeah, fair enough. I like this for tool names personally.
Cool.
So you can see that we have that. I do like, outside of these invalid cursor refs or whatever is happening with the bug that we found in Spec Hub, I do actually like the ability for me to say, I need to add another type of response, or I need to add a request body. Request body is one that I always forget how to define that in like a
because you need like schema and then kind of the content type, and then content type, that's key. Yeah, you see, that's one that would be helpful.
Yeah, let's see what it looks like. So I clicked plus, it brought me down here. We're gonna add a post, and this is barking at us because
the indentation is weird.
Okay.
Yeah,
the indentation
I don't know why.
is way off.
Yeah, but is that a setting? Do you know? It's still one more indent off. If you prettify it, does it do it for you?
When I prettified it, that's when it brought it out to 4. So let's see. Indent count 2, like a human.
But we're making this for robots.
Oh, okay. Should we do it all in one line then?
Yeah.
It didn't listen. Oh man. Okay, so it doesn't obey that unless my setting didn't save. Let's look. Nah, it did save. So it apparently has some settings of its own.
Maybe it needs to restart.
You tell me to turn it off and back on?
That's basically it. That solves 90% of the problems.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so the post, let's just do this real quick. Add a new seed to the catalog. And again, we want to do something meaningful because we want to add context to the LLM that's going to be consuming this.
Yep. Operation ID.
Operation ID, add seed. And then
one thing that makes the operation ID important again is Postman is using it on the list, right? So it helps as well on the left side.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
If you
What
don't,
is it
if
when
you
there's
don't
not an
have,
operation ID?
it just shows post. Yeah.
It just says post. Okay,
Yeah.
that's nice. Let's add the request body. That's nice. It just walked us through that.
Yeah.
It's not in the right
Still
spot,
indentation. Yeah.
but
And indentation.
not even
Yeah.
close to in the right spot. It was indentation and
Location. Well, I mean, it can be on any part of it. There's no specific rule. This is
yeah,
just a logical order, request and response.
yes. Okay, cool. So let's just leave it at that.
It should be a 201.
You're exactly right. You are correct, sir. Steve. Okay, fair enough. I actually do have a ref for this, so we can create it. There you go. Boom.
Sweet. Is that just an object with the ID?
There we go. Yes. Yeah. If we want to go look at it, let's see if we can follow link.
Ooh,
So
it says follow link.
control
Yeah.
click.
I think it said control dot, right? No? Okay,
There we go. It said control click. I was clicking on this bottom thing. So it says create an entity. The schema here is ID. That's cool. An object, and the only thing is an ID. Very nice. We're just going to go with that for right now. That seems
and we don't
plenty.
We don't have to implement it, but the big question here is how important is error responses for an LLM, right? So your typical 400 or your 400 is bad request. Yeah, so your bad request, right? Something's not right on the input. Do you think an LLM would ever fail and would benefit from that to receive that error and then retry with a better input? Or one of the rules that, well, let's stop at error responses. Do you think that would be valuable?
Yes and no. And the reason why is because when we're designing this for AI use, we are not designing this for the AI to call your REST API. That is not what we're doing here. We are designing this REST API to be used as an MCP server, or at least pieces of it to be a tool inside of an MCP server. So it doesn't really work that way. An LLM is not going to be sending in malformed requests. I say that. Whoa, I'm definitely wrong on that. It definitely will, but it will course correct based on the errors that come out, right? Assuming you're doing request validation on the opposite side.
Yep.
Which again, you should be doing.
Sense.
One other thing that I think is really cool with Spec Hub. Earlier today, I wrote this nice API spec, and then I wanted to test to see does it work. So I hit this generate collection button, and it created a collection inside of Postman for me that broke everything down by the paths. This might have been by tags, actually. No, it was by paths. So this was nice because I didn't have to do anything. It just went and created. But you know what just happened? We just created 2 more endpoints. You know what we just did?
Oh, yeah, the refresh. Yeah.
Yes. We caused a drift in this collection that is tracking that API spec. Drift meaning now this is stale because it's not up to date with the spec changes that we made. So if we go back to the spec, here it is. You can see we have this little notification in the arrow. I think it's more obvious when you're not as zoomed in as I am. But I can click on here, the generated collections in here. If we hit update, it should go and update this collection. We can jump straight to, and now you can see seeds.
Nice.
Seeds and add seeds, which is super nice. That's really nice. I think I would like an option. Let me ask you, would you like an option to have that automatically done? Because they're probably watching right now, so you say it and
they'll it's probably why it isn't there. It's tricky, right? At what point in time is it when I save? But did I save just because I don't want to lose my work, right? So I think it just requires more intentionality there onto, hey, I finished the endpoint or the JSON schema. I want it in the collection now, because maybe you have some automated processes that run this collection or monitor this collection or all the other Postman feature that can run this collection, consuming it. And if you updated it prematurely, I think it could be problematic for your processes.
Yes, I agree. It's always, it depends, right?
Yeah.
Always. But okay, so we got that. That's working well. The next thing that I want to do is really phase two. We saw this work for creating stuff. It's a little buggy, it's new, it's fine. But we also designed it for humans and for machines to use. Robots. We'll say
Yeah.
robots to respect them a little bit more, just in case they're listening. But what we have is for human use. Let's look at it as a human. Sound good? List seeds. I have base URL. It put our endpoint in the collection variable as the base URL. I hit send, and it does work because I did actually I did code first for this, the preparation string.
Okay, I see.
Special circumstances.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll let it fly
Okay. But let's try add seed. Let's add one. We should add a Latin seed.
And here's one thing, and I think this might be carried over from kind of the API portion of Postman that's kind of being isolated in the specs. There's another attribute you can add in your open API specs called example. So you can add those examples, and I believe Postman will take those as your base values. In these examples, it would be the example. Yeah, let's try it. That's one that I've leveraged quite a bit for like test automation. I would put like let's say you have a reference to some identifier that has to exist. So you can put that as an example, right? So preceded data. And if you're running any automation or around these collections, it would take that as the initial value for it instead of you having to build it out. But let's see. Ford Hook Zucchini.
Let's see. I added Ford Hook Zucchini. Yes.
Update the collection.
Yes.
Yeah, it probably needs to update.
Yeah. They're out of sync, so that's going to sync them up. Now let's go to it. Let's close those. Add seed. Ooh. Add seed. Oh man, this is why we do things live, isn't it? There we go. Add seed. Ford Hook Zucchini. There it is. So just another reason to honestly, the examples, I don't know if example is a field in the definitions that you give to MCP servers when you're defining the schema. It might be. I can see how that would be useful in a lot of scenarios where you're defining rules.
And I can remember, I remember Open API supports examples, but pure JSON schema doesn't. But I would need to confirm that. That might not be a difference anymore.
Okay, so we saw we made our API. We can see that it's pretty usable as far as humans go. That's not bad. I got it as a human. Let's see what it looks like for robots. Yes. And to do that, we're gonna try. I made this stuff recently, so we're kind of at the mercy of how quickly things index. But Postman released this week a agent generator.
Ooh.
Where it builds the code for you, for not only AI agents but also for MCP servers.
Nice.
So you can do either or / both. If we can, this is the part where I don't know if it's going to show up. I don't know how quickly things get indexed.
So is this based off of the public? Is this like a public? It's not repository. Workspace?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, yes. I found some wonky things in here, like I just searched for garden, and you can see it. And some of these things that show up are very clearly just random Garden Academy
Yeah.
QA class. So this just must be in a public workspace, must be a public collection that's been indexed. I created this collection early this morning, so maybe it's a nightly thing that goes and
Hmm.
indexes them and gets them here in the search. So we're not really going to be able to use that, unfortunately. I
Oh,
wonder if we can search for my name. See, no,
maybe is that you?
that's not me. That's not me. No, that's way too nice to be my stuff.
Too clean.
Yeah, it's way too readable to be mine. Okay, but this is for the sake of completeness, because I do want to see this work. Stripe. We like Stripe. Everybody
We
likes
like
Stripe.
Stripe, yes.
Stripe inside of Postman is like the Home Depot of Postman collections. It is
It has
literally
everything.
everything that you could do, organized by resource type. It is no story. It's not IKEA. We'll just say that. It's
Okay.
it's great that it's all there. It's great, but I don't have any idea how to work these things together.
Okay.
So let's just say accounts. Let's bring in
Okay,
these
select which
accounts.
ones. Okay.
hmm Let's just do the first 6. Add requests to agent, and
So this is
we
basically gonna do
can
what we did manually for the Garden AP or the Garden MCP server. Okay.
yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
take it.
Now, what the different here? Let's get all the way through it, and then we'll talk about the difference. So we can do an MCP server, or we can actually use an agent. So the agent obviously is what we built last week or
Hmm.
last episode, where
Yep.
we took an MCP server and actually made a LLM use it. So it has code to do that. Let's see what that looks like built. So it's going to go and it's going to generate the code. It's going to take the 6 requests that we selected and turn them into tools that are available for that agent to invoke. Now while it's generating, let's fill this dead air with the difference between what this is doing and what you and I have been doing in the past 2 months. So what you and I have been doing in the past 2 months has been uh, creating these tools kind of purpose built. We built these
Hmm.
tools to be MCP server tools. They weren't API endpoints first. They were specifically for MCP servers.
Yep.
And what this is doing is kind of the opposite, or maybe what we should actually be doing. This is taking the API endpoints, taking the important information from them, like the operation IDs, the descriptions from the input schemas, and making those tools, and then exposing those to the agents as an MCP server with Z tools.
Which makes sense, right? And it's kind of why we build APIs because it's an exposing your backend with a single entry point, right? So it's not just front ends or third party integrators. Now there's agents, right? So now there's I was going to say a third person, but a third thing calling your
Yep.
your APIs, right? And this is the way to do it, right? So there's an extra layer than how you expose them to people and front ends.
Well said. Yes. So this is what we downloaded. I downloaded as a zip. I'm on Windows, so it's a zip file. I unzipped it, and these are all of the files that came in. It's a lot. You can
Okay.
see down here in the tools, it's essentially namespaced by where we got them from. But it's structured in a way that honestly I would expect. I don't really understand commands or lib just by looking at it without actually diving into the code. But this is obvious to me. This
Yeah,
is the
those are
operation IDs of all those
the endpoints.
endpoints.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's take a look at one. So it has it's generating everything in JavaScript. It said that was the only language that was supported at the time being.
I will take it.
Yeah, I mean it's using JS docs to define what the inputs are and the outputs are. Has the Okay, it's using environment variables for the collection variables that were attached to that request. And then it's using these parameters, which would be provided by the LLM as tool inputs to actually go and execute the request. So you can see really all it's doing in here inside of this tool definition
Just building the
is
request.
executing a web request. Yeah, right. Here's the meat, right? There it is actually doing it. It's calling fetch on that URL. That's the HTTP method that came from that request inside of Postman, and then there's the data that it's set up. And then it returns the response. Easy enough. And then down here, let's see. So this is the tool def. So this is using, I think this is, let's see what it does with this object. Yeah, okay, so it's exporting that, which I assume is loading it.
It's probably in the client, the commands there.
Probably in here, yeah. In tools,
well, there's discovery tools from lib.
Yep. Yeah, so that's what it's doing. This is pretty slick. It's using glob to say find all the JS files inside of the tools directory and subdirectories, and then import. Yep. Boom, done. Easy enough. Pretty. I mean, that's pretty nice.
Yeah. Okay.
And then when it comes down to it, if we look at the README, let's actually look at a nice README. This is saying this was generated by a Postman. Yep.
npm install, set your keys into the M file.
And so this is an agent. We went with the agent route instead of the MCP server route, which I don't know, may have been a mistake for this live stream. So I don't really know what we're doing. Yeah. And so it's talking about how to run it locally. So node chat, and then you give it a param. Or let's see. Yeah, it looks like you could probably type something in and communicate with that OpenAPI.
Yeah,
so you have your .env file.
Thinking about this, right? The agent route is I'm building an agent. I have my API keys, and I just want my agent to communicate with these APIs, right? Essentially similar to what you would do with an MCP server, but as the owner of the API, I might create an MCP server just to follow the standard protocol for communicating with an agent. Would you think that is that accurate?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Cool.
So what I like about this, I'm gonna take away the screen for a second because we are running low on time. This is a high talking episode. What I like about this is something that I've been complaining about for a couple of months, where I don't really like, here's everything that I have, giving that to the LLM for multiple reasons. You don't necessarily want an LLM to have access to a destructive operation if that's one of the tools you have in your MCP server. And with any API that's designed for humans, you have to have your escape hatch, which tends to be deletes. I don't always want an LLM to do that because I don't always trust the decisions of an LLM. So what I like about what Postman's given us with that generator, and let's just assume we did MCP server instead of agents. Just say that. What I like about that is that I can choose only read operations and create tools that are only reads if that's really what I want to do, or vice versa. I don't want it to have access to my data. I only want it to create data when I tell it to, only the writes.
Yeah. So you can essentially create your own MCP server wrapper around the API and only expose the endpoints you want it to have access to, right? So it's not going to try to discover more endpoints, but you have I say that because I don't know. I say it that way because I don't know, but you're just giving it, hey, here are the 5 set of endpoints that you can call, and with this tool, right? These are the tools I'm giving you access to. And it just creates your own little MCP server for that, which is nice.
It is. The very first piece of content that I created on MCP in general, so this, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, was it was called MCP servers are stealing your APIs, where I was basically just giving a big thumbs down to exactly what we just did, which is API wrapping. Because I can't, as an API provider, I can't control anyone to do that. But I've kind of come
Yeah.
around, I've been exposed to it a lot now, and I can't control that anyway. That's not
Yeah.
something that I can do
And
anyway.
it's like your web page, right? And I was reading an article recently that's like, hey, my web page is getting hit a lot more, and it's agents, right? There's ChatGPT or it's whatever, an LLM. It's just hitting, looking for stuff. So uh, something you can't control, right? Something's going to hit. Can it affect how you design your APIs? Definitely, right? Because you might provide different rate limiting or sort of. I think what you talked about that in that article is the origin, right? So sort of how you do
Mhm.
cores, but for agents, right? So something that identifies that an agent is calling your API, you might have different restrictions, different cost model for those types of requests. So should get interesting how this evolves. But like you said, there's no protecting it from anybody just using your API, just as you can't do it right now, right? If somebody finds your URLs,
Mhm.
they can hit it a million times if they want to, which is why you add different protections like WAF and other stuff on top of your API to control that.
That's exactly right. That's a really good. That's a really good point. So let's recap. I think we have our highest attendance so far in the whole hour we've been on. So we need to recap for what we covered, because we covered some interesting information, not just the cool features that Postman has been releasing over the past couple of weeks. So when we're talking about designing APIs, both for human consumption and for AI consumption, a human is going to be consuming your API as is. What we've always known, right? REST, SOAP, uh, GraphQL, uh, gRPC, right? It's going to be using that. It's kind of it's the same, right? We haven't changed fundamentally how that works, but
Yeah.
now we need to start considering agents are going to be using these APIs, and a lot of times more often than humans are. So how do
Yeah.
we think about it differently and structure it differently and build it differently for them? And that's going to be thinking about your API endpoints as individual tools inside of an agent. I'm not going to say an MCP server because it could be any flavor of tool, right? MCP server is fine. It's nice and fuzzy. If we say it enough, maybe YouTube will pick this up and share our stream more. Um, but really, it's being used as a tool for an agent. So, what do you need for tools to be successful? You need context. So that comes in the form of a meaningful operation ID, because that's going to be your tool name, and
Mhm.
meaningful descriptions that actually add a little bit of business knowledge or domain knowledge into your endpoints.
Yeah, your typical the endpoint that adds a seed. Eh, this, that can be assumable by a post and the name. Well, not always, right? If you're not following REST design, but yeah,
Yeah,
like you said, descriptions, operation ID seem very important. Even on like the get that we had, it's like, hey, if it doesn't find anything, it will return a. Well, that would be on the MCP server, but your API might be consumed directly. So yeah, it could help, right? If it doesn't find anything, it's going to be an empty array, and it's not an error. It's not an issue.
right. Yes. The other important thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about actual design of what these endpoints are is, now that we have LLMs that aren't afraid to do a little bit of work, that are trained on the internet, you can add a ton of additional optional fields to enrich your data. With the seed is actually a really good example for that. It was a bad example for providing context for domain knowledge because it's a seed, but for actual information about the seed, the optional information that a human would never enter, that a machine absolutely would: days to germinate, days to maturity, how deep do you plant it, how far is the spacing between rows. An LLM is going to know all of that information. And if it sees that field in the tool that it's calling, it's going to fill it out for you. And what's great is when the API is shared between an LLM and a human, the LLM is going to go and create that data. Me, the human, is going to read it, and boom, it's all there for me to consume. Beautiful.
You can think of it as automated data entry, right? That you don't need, and maybe you have a human enter the required fields, and then you can enrich it. The LLM can still enrich that the optional data. The more, in the long run, probably valuable data, because, as you said, for me, I have the seed. How deep do I need to plant it, and how I sent you a picture of the tomatoes I planted. I probably did too many in a small area, right? So I
You
did not know
definitely
that.
did. Yes. Yes. And it just gets so fast these days too. Like staying on the seed example, where we're building a seed catalog of everything that I have. Most LLMs that are coming out, all LLMs that are coming out within the past several months, and all the ones going forward, are going to be multimodal, which means not only do they accept text, they also accept pictures, they accept sound, they accept video. So if I have my catalog of 80 seeds, I can go throw them all down on my floor. I don't even have to organize them. Take a picture of it and give it to my LLM and say, can you add these seeds to my catalog? And it is going to recognize all the names of everything, and then it's going to enrich all that information and insert that into my database for me, which I can immediately turn around and say, hey Alexa, what goes well in this garden bed?
Yeah.
So that's one of the big reasons why we add these optional fields that a human would never do, but an LLM has no issue doing because they're not lazy. I say that. Sometimes they are, but they're a lot less lazy than humans are. So
Definitely.
let's recap.
I can agree with that.
Let's recap. From an upper level standpoint, operation IDs, business level context in the descriptions. You have to have those. From one tick lower, all the information you could possibly want should be accepted inside of these ads, inside of these posts, in these puts, because LLMs are going to do it for you. And I'm not going to turn down that free labor. And I am also, this kind of me coming full circle on how I feel about everything. I'm okay, I think, with API wrapping now for tools. I think it's okay. There's still a lot of authority that needs to be had in the space. I still think there's an entity missing in the mix between agents and tools that are being consumed. I still think something's in the middle. Like we know browsers are that for websites and APIs. That's not, it doesn't exist yet, and we're still missing that. But overall, I appreciate everything that's coming out. I think we're moving really fast. I think Postman's doing an exceptional job keeping up with everything and bringing the tools down to individual developers to actually try this stuff out. Obviously, it's not perfect. We ran into a bunch of issues, but that's in the sake of moving quickly. Kind of want it to have issues. That means it got out the door and I can actually use it, find my workarounds, and get done what I need to get done.
Yeah, and API design and contract first design is a big beast to tackle, right? So, but having this, like I mentioned at the beginning, right? It seems like all these tools that I've used, like online tools and extensions on my IDE, consolidated into this, right? And like I can even assume things are going to be done based on other tools that I've used, like the example defaulting, and hey, if you add a min amount, I can't remember what because you had a bunch of negatives for quantity, which that doesn't, right? So if you had a minimum value of 0, it wouldn't add that, right? So that's pretty cool. So the tooling around all this, well, we explored 2 tools, right? It's the API design, and then just, hey, let's give this to an AI agent, or let's create an MCP server around it. We spent you spent more time on it, but creating that MCP server, right? And just getting all the ins and outs of that where it can just be generated for you. That's the kind of tooling I want nowadays, where I don't need to do anything.
Yeah,
because I am lazy.
With the caveat that we all are. We all are. The hard part for me, and I'm still not there, and this needs to be one of the last things that we talk about. I'm still not there yet for generated stuff in long-term viability, because initially, inevitably something's going to happen. I'm going to have to troubleshoot it and debug it. It drifts from the original, and it's like, well, now what? Now what? I'm stuck with all this generated code that I didn't write, that I have to learn, that nobody wrote, that now I have to do. Do I just go ahead and regenerate it from scratch and risk a complete blue-green, set of code? Maybe I'm a little bit familiar with what the blue version looked like, but not totally unfamiliar with what the green version looked like, but it works. Not there.
Yeah.
Not there.
It's the trust but verify at this point, right? So treat an LLM's code generation or any generation as a PR, right? Don't just take it in. You shouldn't, because even with our own teams, right, I would push people to just look at the PR to understand what's going on. I would do the same if an LLM generated. Just look at it so people understand what's going on, because we're eventually going to support it.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so I think we're out of time. Good show. Really good conversation. I knew this was going to be conversation heavy.
Yeah.
And it's weird to see week over, or I guess we do this every 2 weeks, episode after episode, how the vibe shifts with what we're doing, how the opinions change, how the tooling is completely different, and
so
how
it's so immature
future
yet.
looks muddier.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's so immature.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. It's taking a step back instead of falling into the excitement of AI to be real with it. That's you gotta take it all with a grain of salt. So thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks talking about something else AI related that probably dropped in the next 2 weeks. So
yeah, we'll see something new. If something's exciting to you, any of the viewers, let us know and we'll try to cover it. So it's exciting stuff.
All right.
Exciting world we're living in.
Yes, it is.
Right?
Yes. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you later.